Iran is raising the stakes in its nuclear talks with the six world powers, demanding the immediate lifting of financial and oil sanctions. The negotiations have stretched beyond Tuesday's deadline then, with hopes that a draft agreement could be prepared now sometime today, Wednesday. Here are some of the pictures from the revered halls of the Beau Rivage Palace Hotel in Lausanne in Switzerland, which is hosting the high-level talks. You can see the Iranian delegation there very carefully studying the documents they've got to negotiate over, maybe the draft papers, indeed, of this elusive preliminary deal. All the delegations have signalled, however, some progress as they clocked up a week of negotiations thus far. They did make one break last night, though.
Was I missing?
Any progress?
Yes, that's me.
Have you made any progress?
Are you leaving? Are you coming back tomorrow?
Well, as the exhaustive discussions plough on, one Iranian negotiator says they should wrap up, as I was saying there, by the end of Wednesday. RT's Daniel Bushell reports next from Lausanne.
Iran today insisted that a deal can only be reached if all finance, banking and oil sanctions imposed by the international community are lifted. That's a sticking point because the Western powers want sanctions lifted gradually, depending on how Iran proceeds with commitments. So 18 months of tortuous negotiations are up in the air. In the early hours of this morning, we had heard optimism from negotiators, including Iran.
Key agreements by the foreign ministers have been reached. These agreements will be put on paper. They touch upon the peaceful use of atomic energy by Iran and the lifting of sanctions.
A very long day for all delegations. We have accomplished quite a bit, but people needed to get some rest and start over early in the morning.
But now even France's foreign minister has admitted the progress made is not enough as painstaking talks continue. Negotiations may be extended another day to Thursday. But even if the preliminary agreement gets reached today, this won't be the end of it. Parties will have to continue the talks, aiming for a more detailed accord, they say, in 3 months' time. To recap, the international community wants to ensure Iran develops a peaceful nuclear program, but never achieves the capacity to build a nuclear bomb. In return, Iran will see painful economic sanctions lifted. Whether they'll reach that target, we hope to hear officially from EU and Iranian foreign chiefs later today.
Yeah, Daniel Bushell there. Well, keeping abreast of the marathon talks in Switzerland's proving quite exhausting, as you can see there, for some of the journalists too, going about their jobs. Negotiations stretching into the night are becoming quite the diplomatic trend of late. Among the most recent, the Ukrainian ceasefire talks in Minsk in February. They went on for 17 long hours, leaving reporters looking for anywhere to get their head down for a few minutes shutout. But of course, it all goes with a job. However, the serious business of the nuclear Iranian talks goes on. With me now is political activist John Rees. Hi there, John. Thanks for joining us on the line from London there. Israel's Prime Minister has been cautioning the world leaders. Let's talk about this first, against, of course, a potential deal with Iran. Let's remind ourselves of his latest utterances on it, and I'll come straight back to you to get your thoughts, and we'll take it further.
The concessions offered to Iran in Lausanne would ensure a bad deal that would endanger Israel, the Middle East, and the peace of the world. Now is the time for the international community to insist on a better deal.
Well, the same message as ever from him. Is he right that a deal in Lausanne would endanger Israel and maybe the rest of the world as well?
Well, you know, you hear this stuff from Netanyahu all the time. I mean, if it weren't April Fool's Day, maybe you'd think that it'd come early, because this, we have to remember, is the only nuclear-armed state in the Middle East. It has nuclear arms completely illegally and secretly. And so for the Prime Minister of that state to be lecturing everybody else about the danger to the Middle East of possessing nuclear weapons does beg a belief, really. So I don't think that that he can really credibly make those claims. If he were to come to the negotiating table
strong
and say,
antagonism, though, I mean, yes, OK, it's always been, but do you think behind it there are some genuine worries there?
Oh, I'm sure they're worried, and not only over this issue. The the Sykes-Picot agreement, which set up the current borders of the Middle East, is dissolving month by month, and I'm sure that Israel is fearful of that. But it's a contributor to that process, not a break on it. It's something that's added to the instability and continues to add to the instability massively in the Middle East, far more, I think, than the Iranian state has.
Let's get back to where we are now. Then these negotiations ongoing in Switzerland, as we kept saying, I guess maybe end of the day it was no surprise they went on because everyone's going to try and barter the best they can for as long as they can. Iran now says it wants the immediate lifting of sanctions. Well, it said that all along, but what are the chances of that happening? Because that is a big sticking point.
Yes, and I don't know that that the United States and its allies can go there. Although it seems to me that to lift those sanctions, if there is a promise that one state in the region is going to give a commitment not to develop nuclear weapons, which after all is a highly desirable place to be, that the lifting of sanctions shouldn't be too high a price to pay.
Sergei Lavrov, of course, the Russian side's been pretty positive. He's been speaking, a very busy man flying in and out of there. His latest words on it were he hoped it would be successful unless at the last minute someone upped the ante. That's what he said yesterday. Is Iran now upping the ante, and is the US going to lose patience, I wonder?
Well, obviously, they've set this deadline, and there are domestic pressures as well as international pressures on this at the moment. I think one of the things that we have to factor in is that this is now going to be about much more than simply the nuclear deal, however important that is. The United States are carrying out an air campaign against the Islamic State in Iraq, which is in effect backing the Shia militia, which are Iranian-sponsored on the ground. The Saudi air attack on Yemen is now pitting a key American ally against people who are said to be, although I think this is exaggerated, getting some Iranian help in that part of the country. So I can't see a way in which, if this deal isn't done, the consequences of failure will ricochet far beyond the question of nuclear arms.
Yeah, you're not the first person to be saying that today. Well, John, thanks for your thoughts. We appreciate it. British political activist and national officer at the Stop the War Coalition. Thanks for your time. Well, we're keeping across what's happening at these very crucial nuclear talks in Switzerland. As we've been saying, there are hopes some sort of deal will emerge in the coming hours. We'll be fully across it. Our correspondents are there, our cameras and live teams too. Stay with RT International across all our platforms.
Right here.
So we'll see where we go.